Just like, it was just like, I just got it.
Welcome back.
That's it.
Last year was hectic and like people were scrambling last minute.
Yeah.
Okay. They did warn about that in the email, so I did the business.
Better off just getting it on the boat.
Yep. So you arrived there, you got all your bits with you.
Yeah, and you try to get your stuff on the boat, then you get registered, or you get registered, then you get all your stuff on the boat.
Yeah.
Then you, and it's kind of like a waiting game until we get in the water.
They keep talking about the boil size.
Yep.
It's good community, you know, everybody's talking, you know.
Everyone's freaking out.
Everybody's freaking out. What foil should I ride?
Yeah.
What foil should I ride?
Community freak out party.
What are you riding? What am I riding?
Community full freak out.
Oh, I'm gonna go safe.
Yeah.
And nobody goes safe.
Question.
Right here.
Great.
So, is it a flying start then? As long as you're, like, it doesn't matter how you start as long as you're not overrolling?
As long as you're not over.
That's different.
Oh, that's gonna be even more.
That's crazy. Yeah. That's not a good idea.
I see a lot of smiles.
No.
You're responsible for not being over that start line. Simple as that. You got the tracker.
It's going to suit the guys that can do 360s.
Yeah, completely. That's fine. I just don't want it to cut.
What's up, jabronis?
Jabroni?
Hey, bro. All right. Welcome along to M2M. Morning of, as we see. It's the Axis crew van filled with a lot of Frank boards. This is DT Fleming. This is the takeoff spot where you leave Maui. And you can see Molokai there in the background, not too far away. But that's the east shore. There's my board on the left. A lot of Frank. We got there early. We started at 5 a.m. this morning. Travelled across the island. I think it's going to be fun. Everyone was staying by Molokai, in this case. There's Frank's original 9.4 board, the green one. Everyone's staying around Maui, typically. And the launch spot for M2M is on the west side, so it's about a 45-minute drive or thereabouts. A few of the wingers, their setups. There's Kevin, I think. I think he owns Maui Foil House. Huge variety of gear, boards. Starboard, AFS. Don't know what that other one is. Some KTs. Looks like an F1. A couple of Frank boards. I should do a Frank counter because there's some impressive numbers here. There's John Hearn. Just walked down to the beach. Local crusher. All the riders are in green that are doing the crossing. And if you don't know, M2M is Maui to Molokai, and Molokai is between Maui and Oahu, and it is the pit stop for the race weekend. So I think this race is about 30 miles, and then Molokai to Oahu is 40 miles.
Let's go.
Pace. Oh, yeah. Beast. Absolute hammer. Boo. A few more. And there's my board next to Kyle. KT. One of these wing boards actually blew over and broke its wingtip. Unfortunate. Beautiful spot. I came here at the end of winter on my first trip to Maui. Not knowing that it was the actual launch spot, I think. Or maybe Alice entered and took me here. KT, some more Frank boards. Quite a few KTs actually. quite as many as the Franks. There's Gwen, Influencer. Took him to the top on one of the runs. Gabriella, Frank. The Frank board. Some lift gear. The new styly Axis masts. Frank's golden logo. That's Frank's board in the middle there. The black board with the white white flames. Some of the Tahitians. An Axeman. Just past. So yeah, that's basically the span of the group. $7.5 north. Good little board. Beautiful day, and we had plenty of wind to start, which was nice. The year before, apparently, the wind came up a bit later. But super long paddle out to the start line, and I was actually pushing quite hard to get to the start. I barely made it, so next year, and I will be back next year, I'll set off a bit earlier. Some of the guys set off early, and I thought it was a bit crazy. They set off about an hour before the start time, but actually the paddle out might have been half an hour or so. Some of the crew, there's the start boat. Not huge bumps there, still a little bit sheltered by that peninsula there. Everyone was trying to push out into the open sea as much as possible for the start. The crushers were hanging out near the start line, obviously, wanting good position. Ian Martin, new acquaintance from this trip, Aussie guy, really nice guy. He's an up-and-comer crusher. So the start bell's gone. I didn't actually see the flag sequence for this, and I was caught unawares by the siren. I am using the 1160 fireball, which is 1,000 square centimeters, or 997. 64 fuse, 50 skinny, which I think is around 150 or 155 centimeters maybe, square area. A new Frank board that I got for this trip. It's a 9.1 by 17 3/4. KT paddle. I've got my Zhik tights on there. They've come in quite handy. I'll get into gear maybe a bit more later. Not the quickest start, but the bumps were quite stretched out and low, and also quite quick. But I'm participating in these races, but I'm not a racer by nature, and especially not for these crossings. But that wasn't so bad of a start. I am definitely one of the last of the pack. I started behind everyone, and the water was not too bad, but it was moving pretty quick, and at this stage I was a bit worried that I was going to be too slow to match the bumps, and I was having to do some pumps just to keep up. It was a little bit crossed up. Not much variation for me to ride at this point. Hitting foil wakes there, hitting boat wakes eventually. But in high spirits, so I'm pretty stoked that there was wind and bumps, and I was pretty happy with my foil choice overall. The 1160 has a lot of range, and I wanted that low end available. And truly coming into this crossing, I didn't know anything about it, really. You know, I knew the distances, I'd seen it on a map, been talking to a bunch of people, but you don't really know. I didn't really know what to expect. And there on my right, there's 3 boats or 4 boats. At this point, that is I'm pretty much heading towards the edge of Molokai. But that's not actually my target. I am actually behind that cloud bank there under the Speedo is Lanai, which is another island. And the bumps are kind of heading towards Lanai. And that is the actual line that you probably want to take. If you go straight towards Molokai, you'll end up in the shelter of Molokai. So you kind of want to actually stay in the middle of the channel. At least that's what my thinking was at this point after talking to Frank about that one. And Flo. There's Flo there actually, just behind me there. She got a great start. She did really well on this run. She did a practice run earlier in the week and got a bit skunked by going too close to Molokai, and she explained that to me, which helped a lot to stay more towards the center of the channel. She was using F4. No, what's she using? The Momentum, whatever one that is. F1. She's using the F1 716. Somebody called out my name. Not sure who was on that boat. At this stage, not too much worry with the boats, not really much wake. Pretty clean bumps. But now I'm heading towards that boat, and I'm definitely aware that it's there. And I think I got distracted there, and I've ended up in a bit of a weird part in the bumps. And probably just starting to feel some effects of the wakes. What happens when you are downwinding, you often get in tune with the environment and the bumps and the waves. And I can see there in front of me, there's like smaller little ripples running through those bumps. And that's not too bad to navigate, but it is a distraction, and it can sort of fill the troughs. So the wake can pass through your bump, and that wake is its own high point, and that can rob you of the low point that you were kind of expecting. So this boat here actually did get quite close, and I had to change my line there. I can see the guy in the back pointing out to me. There's some white water from the previous boat's wake. This boat here caused me some stress. I felt like I couldn't go right, and I was having to push through sections I wouldn't want to travel through. And it's hard to know if who's captaining that boat, and if I go and cross in front of them, are they going to see me? If I fall off, am I going to get run over? You know, the boats definitely affected the race somewhat. I definitely understand why they're there. Each competitor could choose to have a boat escort if they wished. Or maybe not even an escort, but like boat caddy. But they've backed off now. But I can see this water's a bit churned up, and it's not really the true bumps that would have been out there. This is before the M2O, and the M2O was much worse. So in hindsight, this was actually pretty sweet. There was a boat wake there. I just passed through and felt my foil drop out a little bit in the aerated water. And the boat wake, just went through it. It's fine. Pretty used to going through the odd boat wake, but you can often see them coming. But the effect of, say, 10 or 20 boats on the water is that the effect on the water is not so obvious, and you might go following a sequence that you were planning on navigating through, and all of a sudden the trough that you thought was going to be there is no longer there. So here a bump's just past me. I've sort of got enough low end to just sit behind it, but I can see that churned up water. There's a lot of micro peaks and energies there. But you know what? Boats on my left. Not too worried about those boats. I was pretty happy with my foil choice, and having low end gave me time to recover from bad situations, and that was a big part of why I chose the 1000. And it's not really a racy foil. But I was here to participate in the race, but not really set any times. My goal is to get to the end, and my goal, especially for this race, was to get to the end with ease, knowing that the M2O was... I had one day between this race and the M2O to recover. So here I'm sort of behind a bump, going slow, happy with that, but adding in a few pumps to maintain, and just looking for somewhere to go. And, you know, you might do 4 or 5 pumps, but if something doesn't sort of show up after those 4 or 5 pumps, and you have to do another 4 or 5 pumps, and then something doesn't show up again, all of a sudden you start building a little bit of fatigue in the legs. You start thinking, I start thinking maybe negative thoughts like, oh, this could be quite hard, and all of a sudden you're distracted from your environment. My thinking before this race was kind of a clean slate. Didn't really know what to expect, but trusted myself to be able to navigate what I would encounter as far as the ocean state, but not really knowing about boats and other competitors. And I mean, if you're foiling, you know what it's like to run through somebody else's foil wake, and I've just gone through that guy's. I can see it in the water. There's like a... he's leaving a trail of white water, or she. But right now I'm probably pretty stoked. I can't remember this exact moment, but realizing that I am riding sustainably and nowhere near a stressed state as far as getting to the end. But it's hard also to know what 45 kilometers, maybe 47, is going to feel like. I haven't done that distance a whole lot. I've probably done it 5 times, maybe, or longer. So conservation and keeping my battery full is at play. I used my Garmin and set a track to follow, but I didn't go through the starting gates of my track, and the whole time my watch was just telling me to turn around and go back to the opening marker. So it turned out that was a complete waste of time. But what it did show me was distance traveled so I had some knowledge and heart rate. So not sure if I was checking that at the stage, but look at that water there, like in front of me. It's kind of soupy, messy. That is the sort of boat wakes that you, if you did this run, might face for the race. Not major, but it's definitely there. There's a good bump going through. The bumps were moving quite quick, and I couldn't actually just keep up with them without adding my energy to the system. And that in part was my foil choice. That was a bit draggy, especially with the bigger rear. So when those bigger ones came along, I was having to add a few speed pumps to try and match them. And throughout the run, I do that. I chased a few bumps ahead and would run them down and would build up fatigue in my legs. Okay, so my idea was to conserve battery a little bit to get the full run in. So I probably turned the camera off for 10 minutes here. 5 or 10 minutes perhaps. What was I saying? Oh yeah, chasing bumps. So I did chase a few times, and I would get to the bump I chased, but I couldn't keep up with it anyway, and I ended up back where I started with tired legs. So the same rules, apply, and you got to be smart about your energy. I'm not a young whippersnapper. I'm not old, but I'm not an athlete like a lot of these other racing guys and girls. Feeling confident about my line and heading towards Lanai and not heading so much to Molokai, which you can see above my head there. That's where the corner of the island is, I guess. And I'm looking ahead and trying to see the lines that other people are taking, and I've got people out on my left that are heading straight with the bumps, and there was a bunch of people to my right and ahead that were heading more towards Molokai. So I feel like I had a good line in the middle, which was good. I have in my drink bladder a 1.5 litre capacity, and I've just got water in there. I've got 2 drink bottles on either side of my drink bladder, and those are currently empty. I had filled them with coconut water and drank them throughout the morning. I tried to load up on fluids before the race, and I was happy to empty those drink bottles and consume them so that I wasn't just carrying the weight on my hips. I've still got the weight on me because I consume them, but I didn't think I was going to need all of those fluids on the run itself, so I was happy to drink them beforehand. And the sense of weight is different when it's internal versus on your hips or on your back or chest or wherever you're carrying your water. But yeah, now kind of getting into a bit of a cruise mode. Realizing that I'm not in the race, so not... A part of me probably feels a bit left out. Some maybe not, but I'm aware of the situation and where I am, and as far as the race results go, and so I really am focused on longevity and having a good run. I don't want to fall off, and so I'm not taking any risks. I'm not riding super high on the mast. Because I didn't want to come down. So I'm faced with a boat wake. I've turned away. Two people on my left there I can see in the distance. And that's giving me some heart that I'm not completely at the back. And the fact that I wasn't stressed, I think, about this run felt like a win for me. I was in an environment that I understood, and instead of thinking about racing and speed, I started thinking about the situation and the beauty of traveling from one island to another. Just starting to have a good buzz. Enjoying life. I have spoken to quite a few people at this stage, and one of the guys that I respect is Dave Kalama, and I've done a few runs. I did at least a run, maybe 2 runs with him on Molokai, and we chatted about boards and foils and a bunch of stuff, but he mentioned to me that he's done this run, the M2M, 30 odd times, and how good it was. And he also pointed out that your first channel crossing really is a learning experience, and it's just about seeing what it's all about. And I took that to heart, and that was a part of my foil selection. I could have sized down, although I left the next size down in the fireball range at home, which was a mistake. Getting close to that prop wash. I would have enjoyed having the 1070, I think. The reason I didn't bring it was that I have one of the Axis race foils, and that size is kind of similar to the range that the 1070 holds, but it's just far superior as far as efficiency goes. And so I bought that instead of the 1070, but actually I don't really know the racing foil well. Those foils are still in prototype stage, and I've used it a few times, but it's a small foil for me. It's about 30% smaller than the one I'm on, and for its size, it has a lot of usability, but it also requires quite a deft touch and feel, and I'm quite a heavy-footed rider, and I enjoy having a good platform under me, and the smaller foils require something that I'm not familiar with, basically, to use, and you've got to be light on your feet, you've got to get up with a faster forward speed. And so I took the safe option of taking the 1160. Had I have taken the 1070 to Hawaii, I might have used it on this day. And I would gain some top end, but also I would lose some bottom end, and it could have been a mistake. So it's hard to say. I definitely would have been more stressed on the 1070, and in fact I found myself in quite a few spots where I was relying on the low end of this 1160. So I think ultimately I chose the right foil for this run, and hindsight is great. I've learned, I know now, but I didn't know then, and so I wanted gear that was going to cover bases that I weren't sure of what they would be, what I would be faced with. But right now it's all pretty commonplace. This water is still a bit churned up from the boats and a little bit flat in spots, and like that water in front of me there is quite messy, and that's just turbulence from the boats passing by. 20 boats say by now. But it didn't take away too much from the experience. It added some difficulty. It might have even added to the experience because of the extra concentration that it required to navigate. You don't really do downwinding to make it easy. So adding in some pumps because the water's quite flat and I'm trying to pass plateaus. The problem with the boat wakes is that something that looks like it could be positive energy, like a firm section of water, like raising water, might not quite be what it seems, and it might be raised because there's wash going in another direction, and that plays a part in the feeling and the resistance that you receive from your foil. If you have your foil nice and high in the water column and you're on water that's raising up and you pump against it, you're going to have a nice firm feel. If you are in water that is on the back end of a bump and lowering and you pump, you might feel that there's no resistance there and your foil just sort of presses through and down into the water without propulsion or resistance. And it's much easier to know what to expect when it's a clean environment, but when you've got multiple energy sources like boats passing through, there is the bump might be going with you or against you. It's hard to say. But I'm looking pretty relaxed, not pumping too much. Fading a bump there. And sometimes fading a bump, there wasn't always somewhere that I could just glide to, especially with the restricted glide using the bigger foil. Or foils, front and rear. I remember a couple of bumps that were a decent size, and dropping down them actually required a bit of thought and concentration because of the speeds that they produced. But there was nothing too big at this point. But yeah, there's some downwinding going on. Bit of a turn there. Crossed a peak. Having to pump to re-establish some speed to match the environment again. That's the thing with the bigger foil, is it doesn't just accelerate up to speed because of the resistance across it. Put a grip on my KT paddle there, you can see behind my hand. I found the KT paddle just a touch slippery when it was wet, but that grip has just completely solved the issue. It's a dragon grip or something like that by name. Highly recommend it. It was recommended to me by Scott Keon, who is an accomplished paddleboarder who has done a lot of paddling, and he told me straight up that was the one to get. Little surge there, got some speed, you can see some bumps, so I'm into some good stuff. I don't think these boats are on my mind much anymore. The proximity of that first boat sort of desensitized me to these other boats that were at a further distance. Looks like I'm pushing through that bump ahead, but it faded anyway, so I probably did that pumping for nothing. That looks like a boat wake that I've just caught there as a bump. And that's well and good, but then it put me out of sequence to the bumps around it. So I think I connected to the energy of that boat a little bit that had passed by, but that's not in sequence with the rest of the bumps. And that happened a fair bit. It's like encountering backwash or crossed up energy or something like that. But it's downwinding, and downwinding is sort of real-time problem solving. And you just kind of solve whatever problem you're faced with. And there's an uphill, or let's, at a glance, if we don't already know if there's a better path to the left or right, let's take a glance and see. And if you look to the right and it doesn't look like it's an option, then just go left, for example. If you look right and it is an option, take it. If you look left first and it doesn't, maybe it looks intimidating, or maybe it looks a bit blank, then if you've got enough speed and mast height or glide, take a look and give yourself another option. Somebody come down. I'm sure he cared what I said. If you have enough time and you're kind of in a spot where you need to make a decision, then by all means give yourself a couple of options. But that sometimes is easier when you have experience and you know how much energy you have stored via mast height or forward speed. If not, pick a path to check, and if it's to the right and it looks usable, go for it. And if it looks kind of tricky and it's going to require some pumping perhaps, but it's within your energy system or wheelhouse, or sometimes it's better with the devil and maybe there's a better option to the left, but by the time you look left, if left's not an option, you're gonna have to go back right anyway and reassess, and it might even be worse. It could be better, but it's often in downwinding useful to be assertive, and if you can't see any options, or then just start pumping and just start self-propelling. Keep your speed high, gather mast height, and just entertain yourself until you see somewhere to go. That would be my advice for that situation. Molokai is definitely getting a bit closer there in the distance. Another camera reset. That could have been the last one, I'm not sure. I think the battery lasts an hour and a half or so. So I knew I couldn't film the whole run straight. So I did have to manage that somewhat. Looks like I'm into a bit more wind. I think the bumps are getting better as I go. I've gained some ground away from Maui. Probably into some more open water, more towards the center of the channel. My instinct will be to head towards Molokai, but I can see from this angle, like if I just went straight to that point, I'm going to be close to the shore, and that being close to land and shallower water means there's likely to be less energy or slower energy. So I'm trying to take Frank's advice, which was to head towards Lanai quite seriously, and from flow, but not going too close to Molokai. That's some good speed there, a bit of a surge. So that tells me that the bumps are actually getting a bit better. And I would say that the boats have dispersed somewhat by this stage. Liking the colours of the Molokai apparel, the M2M. I scored some good shirts on this trip, so pretty stoked with that. Some swag. Throughout this run, it's quite automatic to me, but I'll be feeling out foot positions on the board and against the foil system and trying to make sure that my stance feels correct to what I'm used to. And that changes as the water changes as well. And I know that it's a decent distance to travel, and I'll be making micro adjustments with my feet. So I might move my front foot forward a little bit to give it a rest and give it more leverage over my system. And if my back leg is feeling a bit in need of some care, then I might move it back, but then of course my stance has been widened. So I might bring my front foot more towards the pressure of the foil, which means bringing my front foot backward towards the back of the board to take more of the pressure and to give my back foot a rest that way. And then I could also move my back foot back for the leverage as well. I've had to think about that. Over time, I was quite a back foot dominant rider, and originally I think that actually stemmed from potentially surfing. I was probably a bit back foot dominant surfing before my injuries, but I did injure my left hip, which is my front foot, and tried to maintain my activities through my injury, and that meant favouring my front leg. And so when it came to foiling, I would often give my front leg some leverage advantage over the system and have less pressure through my left leg. But over time, I had a second hip surgery, which didn't actually go that well, and I still have a bit of a tricky left hip. And so that's just led me to favouring that front leg a little bit, which means not loading it up as much as, for example, my back leg. The problem with that is the back leg often does a lot of work during foiling anyway, and it's often the leg that'll go depending on your stance. Some people are naturally a front-footed rider and will load up the front foot and steer more with the back leg, but that wasn't me naturally. So I've been working on that and trying to neutralize my stance. That could be something you could look at in your own riding. Stance work is definitely a positive thing to approach and to work on. And a lot of foiling is managing fatigue, whether it's pumping, riding longer distances, whatever your foiling discipline. Like pumping, for example, a lot of people will burn out their back leg, and so it's kind of, I would suggest finding ways to equalize the energy of your body, the energy usage. And if you're using your back leg a lot for pumping, then perhaps you need to try and add your front foot into that system. You don't want to cook one part of the body, because it's almost like a link system, and if one link goes, the whole thing comes crashing down. So if you are back foot dominant, try and bring your front foot into the system to take more load and more responsibility in your riding. And especially when you're doing some pumping and downwinding and things, if you're a back-footed rider, that a lot of your weight bearing is going through that back leg, and then you have to do some pumping, or your pumping's also going to be running through that back leg. It's like hopping on one foot. Hopping on one foot is not really sustainable for most humans, and if you can add your second foot in to that hopping sequence, you're going to be able to hop not even twice as long, much longer. I would guarantee that. You might be able to hop for 1 minute on one leg, but you might be able to hop for 5 or 10 minutes with two legs. So it's quite exponential. So I would recommend that with most foiling that you're doing. Find out your weak spots, and instead of just making that part of your body stronger, actually try and bring other parts of your body in to help out and equalize the loading. And it could be other things like maybe not leaning forward or not leaning back, trying to be upright. I know some people ride with an offset stance. I used to do that too, but that can often cause some issues too, where you can't rely on one leg, you can't pressure one leg, because it will be your front leg, say, for example, if it's on the heel side of the board, you can't just lean on that leg, because you'll just turn heel side, and your back leg is likely to be toe side. You can't just lean on your back leg, because you'll be inputting force into off-center parts of the board. If you push through the center of the board, it's a bit more of a stable platform and often more reliable. And what I found when I was riding in an offset stance, to turn toe side, I would have to use my back leg as the dominant leg, because it was my back leg that was toe side, because of the offset. And so if I was turning toe side, my back leg would potentially load up more and less even pressure through the body. And of course that's not ideal if you're also pumping through the back leg. So a lot of foiling I found is minimizing inefficiencies, and the more you work on that sort of path, the more it gives you a path to follow, and you start noticing other inefficiencies, and the more you correct, the more it gives you scope to notice other issues with your riding. And I know this because I've had a lot of issues with my riding, and still do, and I'm constantly working on them. But your Molokai is definitely getting closer there, and I've probably come maybe as close as I want to there. At some point, if I keep continuing towards the speedo there on the screen, I'll be making distance away from Molokai, but that will keep me in clean energy, clean water. But of course, then I'll be losing distance to land or gaining distance from land, and that can be a bit scary. So I think in my heart, I want to head towards Molokai because I know that land is safe. But in my mind, I know that I should be still continuing towards Lanai and staying on that line that would be between the if you split this channel into thirds, the third that is closest to Molokai, you kind of want to be on that line between the first third and second third, if that makes sense. Being about a third out into the channel is was suggested to me as being optimal. I don't know what a lot of the other guys are riding. I know some of the Axis guys are riding. I had the pleasure of hanging out with them leading up to this race and over the past few weeks here in Maui. And they are using from like a 500 centimeter foil to about a 700 centimeter foil square, which is starting to get pretty small in my books, but it seems to work. And some of the guys are heavier than I am, like Luke, for example. Luke is an absolute beast, and during the M2O he was getting speeds of 45 kilometers an hour on his foil choice. So these guys, the pros, are moving fast. But they have the fitness to back that up, and if there's not enough energy in the water to just rely on that water's energy for propulsion, they've got a huge energy source within themselves. And or not just energy, they don't just thug, they're also very technical and can make use of what energy is available and navigate. And then they have the luxury of being hammers also. But I'm holding some good speed there, 28, in a bit of a zone. It's faded back down to 22. I think naturally this foil wants to go around the low 20s, but is also quite comfortable holding high 20s as well, and can handle surges into the 30s without too much loading, which is really cool. And I can probably get down to about 16 kilometers an hour on it and still have pressure under my feet. A cursory camera dunk. So I've pumped, going pretty slow, and yeah, I'm still going a bit faster than those bumps, so I can't just run straight into them. As I pick up speed, I have to veer off, unless I've got glide that will take me over a section. I don't want to be just running into uphills and whatnot and having to pump through it. So just navigating left to right. It's kind of your only two options. Well, I guess you've got three options. You can go straight, or left, or right. And you can often be faced with quite unique seascapes on those three options. It's a different experience, fading off the back of bumps, left to right, and tackling what bumps are coming toward you from behind. It is quite an exploratory tactic because you can't see what's behind you, and you end up navigating what you're shown in that moment. So if there's a bump in front and I turn to the right, I'll see down the line, but I won't have been watching those bumps. If you have a faster foil and you are going straight with the ocean and downwind and you're overrunning, you can do that without pumping often. Once you get up to speed, especially on these efficient high aspect foils, you can just pass through energy and you'll reclaim new energy sources before your gliders run out and reattach, and it can be very efficient. But what you end up doing is, as you travel straight downwind with the bumps, you can see, you have a great scope of vision about what is your option. So you might have if you're looking straight ahead, you might have 45 degrees to either side within your view, and you can sort of calculate how fast you're going, how far that speed will take you. And of course the bumps are also moving forward, so you have to sort of take that into consideration and calculate if you're going twice as fast as the bumps. You'll see somewhere in the distance and you think, well, I'm going a certain speed, but also those bumps are going a certain speed. But you start to learn where you will be able to glide to. And it's a nice way of doing it, and it's quite a fun way of attacking the ocean. Whereas fading bumps is also great, and you can do turnbacks and cutbacks and figure of eights and whatnot. But running down bumps is also pretty damn fun. I guess it's a bit more of a scary way to ride, in that if you're going straight downwind and you don't see a path ahead and you turn left or right, then because you've been going straight downwind, you're probably on a foil that's quite fast and efficient, and it probably likes that upper speed range. And turning against the wind, you start, like, say you turn right and you've got the wind blowing against you, that can slow you down quite quickly. And having a foil that likes to go fast and putting it in a position where it's going slow with wind resistance can be quite a nervous experience. And it's probably why I gravitate towards bigger foils, because it gives me more time at that low end to assess what's around me and where my next energy source is going to be. Looks like I've turned the corner there a little bit now for Molokai. I feel like we were looking at the corner of the island, and now we're looking down the line of the island. And just above my head there in the distance is a bit of land, and the race finishes before that to the right. So there's a bit of a high point in the land under those clouds, and to the right is a low point, and that's where the destination is. But there's Lanai under that cloud bank on the left. Just saw it there for a second. I think at this stage, actually, I had Tomoko in quite close proximity. But I looked through this footage a little bit when I was transferring it, and I couldn't spot her in the footage, and I think she's just on my left a lot, and the camera unfortunately just doesn't look that way, because I felt like I was riding with her for like 20 minutes or half an hour, and she actually fell off at one point and I gained some ground, and it wasn't that long until she was back on my heels. So that was really cool. I felt like I got quite close to her actually at one point, and so I picked a path that would take me away so that we didn't interfere with each other. Molokai. Oh, there's a boat. I have a feeling that boat was caddying a parawinger, from memory. In some ways, I've thought in the past that like parawinging and winging makes life quite easy when you are foiling downwind. I mean, it does also block your vision, and you have to keep it flying, so it has its own issues. But it is a free power source to get on foil. But when you're going into new zones, I can imagine it's quite intimidating being completely reliant on the wind. So right now, if the wind stopped, those bumps are still going to be rolling, and I can probably re-establish eventually. It's a bit more difficult without wind at your back pushing you forward. But if you're relying on a wing and you've come off foil and there's no wind, you're skunked. So yeah, winging and parawinging is surfing. I think I'm kind of getting some boat wake there. I'm getting some faces there to play on. Yeah, but relying on a wind source to get on foil has its own pitfalls, for sure. And I imagine it's quite scary, especially when you are in the lee of the island. You know, getting some turns in there. I'm definitely feeling comfortable right at this moment. I'm probably trying to show off to a little bit to those people in the boat, but that is what it is. But it's left me there. It's turned inland a touch. I think at this stage I've broken free from Tomoko. So yeah, she just didn't end up on camera, which is crazy, because I felt like I was riding with her for a long time. The water's changed a bit here, so it's slowly becoming more organized as it turns the corner around the island. And at some stage up ahead, it lines up quite well. And in fact, it was kind of the most organized water I've seen. Definitely top 10. But yeah, this far I haven't used that much energy. Got plenty in the tank. Feet are starting to feel slightly numb in spots, and I just keep adjusting. I sort of arch my toes a little bit, try to get some blood flow happening. I change my stance to lessen force in each foot. I turn my feet at 45. You know, I start pointing my toes towards the nose of the board. I'm doing little things to just try and change my body position. Loving the board from Frank. He did a really nice job on this one. Some extra liters for me because I gained some weight from when I gave him my first dimensions, and so he's added some literage for my personal weight, but also for me to carry luggage on these journeys, water and bits. It definitely plays a role, carrying extra weight on you. When I'm in New Zealand, I'm often wearing a wetsuit, which when you go into the water, holds water and can get quite heavy. But even in the tropics, when you're carrying water with you, I become very aware of the extra weight, especially initially through the pop-up sequence. I actually put my camel pack on quite early in the day to try and desensitize to it and adjust and calibrate, and got used to having that weight on my hips. So that was quite strategic from me. I've not done that before, and I go to hop in the water and I clip on my water bladder, and it just feels like just dead weight, and I feel heavy, and then I go and have to float on my board, and if I haven't calibrated to the weight, it feels very off-putting. So that could be something you could try, is put on your equipment a bit earlier, walk around with it, desensitize, become familiar with the feeling of it, and just having it on you and walking around you should naturally adjust to the difference of what do you call it? Center of gravity and whatnot. Looks like I'm feeling pretty casual here. Not much pumping going on. I don't remember the last time I saw myself pump, actually. There's a few. I definitely got caught behind a bit there. But the water's starting to line up. The speed of the water is probably matching my foil a bit more now. It has slowed down a little bit, the bumps, as I got closer to Molokai. A lot of the racing guys will be further to the left, staying in the open bumps. I've headed more towards land now. And just that water turning and dragging and being a bit more sheltered was just naturally slower. But I felt like the water was moving a bit quicker than me at the start, and so now the water's slowed up and I'm feeling more in sync with the environment, which is really cool. It's starting to become effortless. Running through a bit of a bump plateau there. And when that happens, I'm pumping, trying to stay high on the mast, trying to use the minimal amount of energy. I'll be trying to spot my next energy source, which is often a low point. And how I think a foil works is that you point it downhill, and the gravity will pull you down that hill like a skateboard. And if you can keep finding downhills, you can keep running fast. But as you get into a flat, like on a skateboard, your momentum eventually starts slowing, and you have to start adding your own energy, whether that on a skateboard that's pushing with your foot or doing pumping turns. So when I'm on a plateau and I'm in flat water, I'll be looking for a downhill to travel into where I can regain speed, get a bit of a free ride. And then, God's will, you'll keep receiving some downhills. I do remember thinking I was getting maybe close to Molokai because I was finding the energy a little bit more sparse, as I just mentioned about it slowing down. And at some point I'm trying to actually head back out to sea to access bigger variations in the water, to access that downhill. Flo had warned me that if you get too close, then it's quite hard to get back out to sea. Okay, so I get joined by a couple of wingers here actually. So I just saw one, tried to put him on camera. And so I remember the section, it starts getting pretty playful here. This is where it all started lining up, I think, as it turns the corner around Molokai. And it starts organizing itself, and I'm getting visions of corduroy in front of me. And I start getting some faces to work with, and this really was the pleasant part of the run that became surfy. And I was pretty stoked to not be racing or focused on my time, and started enjoying the bumps here. This is one of those moments in life where I'm thinking right place, right time, and just feeling everything feels good. There's no tomorrow, there's no yesterday. And that's a beautiful place to be. Doing some minor wiggles there to just navigate through. Kind of overtaking little bumps here. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm aware that it's a race and I'm always going forward and I'm not just goofing off, but I am maximizing the ability to have fun over performance. The audio is actually pretty decent in this one. Maybe I'm getting to grips with a lot of the knocking that's happening inside that dive case, and I'm getting a little bit softer with the pedal. I remember trying to size up these bumps, and they were like thigh to waist high. It's quite hard to tell when I'm foiling about the size of the ocean around me, but I put quite a bit of effort into. I'm feeling the stoke there. Quite a bit of effort into trying to actually truly judge the size. I'm definitely of the calling it a bit bigger than it is rather than smaller than it is. I think it's my natural position. Yeah, I remember thinking here that I was like, this is why people like the M2M. This is why people do this run for fun. These bumps here. But I'm not getting too radical. For one, my setup isn't really a radical setup. I rode a setup today that is some Axis prototypes that was actually radical, and it took me a bit of getting used to, but within one Molokai run it started feeling amazing. Starting to feel pretty relaxed. I've grabbed a Zin. New habit formed on Hawaii. If you're under 21, don't go near it. But I can imagine, or I can tell you what I'm thinking now, is that I'm feeling good about this race. I'm feeling good about this body of water. The journey that I'm undertaking. I can see some wingers above my head there. And at the time I was thinking the same thing. It was feeling great. I was thinking, no big deal. I've got the skills. It was quite a relief. Confidence is high. On the flip side of that, worried a little bit about other people's perceptions, probably. You know, I want to show well in front of my friends and new acquaintances. And I'm definitely aware that I'm not traveling fast. But that is what it is. I could have attacked this run, sized down, tried to finish this distance in a faster time. And I would have been equally happy with that effort. But I now think about it, thinking the stress of that potentially would have removed the presence that I had during this run. So as I'm riding down this body of water, I'm truly living this moment. And I'm focused on the bumps. I'm focused on the good vibes. I'm not focused on... I guess a part of me is focused on the fact that I'm not going to place well in the race. But that seems of little consequence, and more importantly, I'm having a blast. I've learned a new run. I'm doing a run that I had heard of, so there's some grandeur about doing this crossing. The fact that I've got the M2O a day later. And that it's feeling easy, and there's a bit being taken away from that, of that I'm not racing, and but that's life, you know. There's a balance there, and I chose to take the path that I chose, which was to have fun, to enjoy it, to experience. My thinking coming into this race was to race, or was to do my own thing. And I put a fair amount of thought into it leading up to this day, over the weeks that I was in Hawaii and also in New Zealand. And that was, the conclusion was, that I was going to the words are escaping me, but I was going to do it on my own schedule, my own... I guess I thought that if I tried to race, I probably didn't have it in me to make the distance, and I thought it was best to ride this body of water and do this journey in my own way and for my own pleasure rather than for the result. And I was also quite aware that I had the M2O the day after. Like, as I am on the board there, the next day is going to be a rest day. And then I've got the M2O, and the M2O has been a bit of a stressor on my mind for many reasons. But this downwinder that I'm doing right now has really built my confidence for that. And maybe part of that is a cop-out. When you know that you can't win, when you know that, say, racing isn't your thing, it can be easier to not, for me, to not challenge myself in that way. But then I still have the words of Dave saying that your first crossings really are exploratory. They're not about performance. It's about learning, understanding, and just the crossing itself is the achievement. And, you know, I'm acing this run. to this point, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling a sense of achievement from what I'm doing. And that in itself is enough. And I probably don't need to add the racing factor in to get more feels than that. And, you know, it's been a few days since this now. And the next time I do it, I'm likely to try and add more. It's not about exploring as much. I've done it. I know what it is. I can try and refine the experience, and that is likely to be to go faster and to try and push myself and see what I can achieve with perhaps a faster foil, being more competitive and actually racing and trying to get to the end in a faster time, or as fast a time as I can achieve. So I think that sums it up. I've given myself some longevity here. I'm enjoying it for what it is, and I can receive future enjoyment by adding the racing element into it. But here the foil's feeling fantastic. Doing some turns. Although they don't look as radical as they felt at the time. Today I was on maybe an 850 centimeter foil, which was very turny, quite a low span, and it was truly more surfy and more instinctual. Actually, it became more about leaning for me, and just using a little bit of lean input, because the foil was so responsive that the needed inputs were far fewer, and that was quite exciting. It took a while to get used to today, but within the length of the Molokai, I really felt in tune with my setup, and I'm pretty excited actually with this new foil that I've been trying from Axis. It's not one of the racing ones. So that probably felt like a fail there, where I had to pump for a while. I sort of got used to just linking turns and staying in the energy, and then I've turned myself into a position where I have to pump my way out of it. And I think two other factors are I've gotten a bit tired. I've been standing on the board for a while now, and also the bumps are starting to get smaller. So the further I go along this coastline, the more sheltered the water is. And I am on the bigger size of foil compared to the other guys, and so I'm still able to utilize it, but a lot of other people are quite a bit further out to the left than I am right now. And for good reason. There's more energy out to the left. I'm definitely not heading to Lanai, which is behind that cloud bank on the left. some speed there. Can hear the foil. I sanded my foil. I was inspired by the other Axis guys. They all sanded their foils for these races. And so I gave my foil wet sand. I didn't do my mast, but I did the front foil and stabilizer. And I think it did make a difference. If nothing else, it's a bit quieter. I can see the colour change in the water. It's gotten a bit shallower, a bit more green than blue. And I'm probably realising that the bumps are shrinking and likely heading a bit more to the left, or at least straight down the coast. But that building there's a building above my head, and that's the finish point of the run. And I was told that it would be quite easy to spot, and it was. But here, I am definitely feeling like I'm a bit more on the inside, and I think if I did this again for performance, I would head more on the outside and cut in more at the end. Whereas here I'm sort of running down the coast and staying in sync with the bumps. But I've got that luxury because I have a foil that can go quite slow. Probably quite happy to be getting to the end, to be honest. I think it was 47 kilometers or so. I'll put the stats up. I forgot to do that, so I'll do that. There's a two-man canoe. Just above me there. I think I gravitated towards them as well, a little bit, which took me even further on the inside. And here I'm definitely realizing that the bumps have shrunk. I can see the bluer water out to the left, and I should be over there. I could see the straight line, I think, to the finish, but I start veering away, I think, or at least I did it at the time. It crossed my mind. Whether it was now, or a little bit later, or a bit earlier, I'm not sure. Okay, so now I'm getting into pump mode because the bumps are definitely not enough to sustain me, but I can pump to the occasional glide here. But at some point I just end up pumping. So I've forgotten about filming. And I was quite confused, and as I passed a boat here, I actually asked them if they know where the finish line is.
Where's the finish line, mate?
I didn't get the answer. It wasn't very obvious. The M2O is very obvious. I think I've already crossed it there on that buoy behind me. But I could see people still paddling quite fast, and I thought maybe the finish was on the inside, even further. But that buoy in the background there is the finish line. Not that one. But I figure now that if I haven't crossed the finish line, then I wasn't going to hit the finish line. And quite a few others around me didn't know where the finish line was either. So it wasn't just me. There was Nick. That boat there ended up giving us a tow in, which was really cool. So that boat is now towing that guy behind it. They've dropped a rope. So yeah, that was the M2M. If you made it this far, congratulations. I hope you enjoyed the footage. Here I am paddling over towards the boat. I want to get in on that tow action. Amazing experience, amazing bumps, great run, great people, great gear, totally stoked on everything. Made it to land. There's Frank, Elliot, and Elliot's filming there next to me. We were greeted with some fresh fruit and coconut water. This is the award ceremony and dinner. We've got a beautiful hula. The two younger guys on the outside were learning and had the confidence to get up and perform for us, which is really cool. A beautiful day, beautiful experience, beautiful life. Beautiful hula, beautiful lady, beautiful weather. Just everything is just so good. Be good. Don't forget to go out and hydrate. Don't get dehydrated on your runs. Look after yourselves, guys. Bye.